What is life? Why am I here? How is it all connected? And how am I going to navigate this beautiful but crazy journey? I'm Sylvia and welcome to the Soul Sunshine podcast. Today I'm talking to Lockie Cooke. Lockie is the founder and CEO of iYarn, a platform that facilitates safe spaces for people to come together to have meaningful conversations. He's working with businesses, organizations, and community groups across Australia to create safe spaces to truly connect. Lockie was awarded the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year for the Western region of Australia in 2015 and has represented Australia at the UN, G20 and CHOGM. He is the founder of the Indigenous Communities Education and Awareness Foundation and is a past board member at the School of Social Entrepreneurs Australia. Welcome to the Soul Sunshine podcast, Lockie. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
It's great to be here, Sylvia. Thanks a lot.
No worries. Lockie, first of all, I want to say a huge congratulations. You've just become a dad. A few weeks ago, you and your partner had a beautiful baby boy. So congratulations. How are you going?
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's funny, we're on a Zoom call here and I'm looking at myself and realise, it looks like I certainly haven't been having much sleep. But outside of that, it's a real joy. It's like a few of my mates who've had babies, it's just like, mate, it's a way you really start deeply feeling love when you have this little thing. But it's crazy. We're starting to realise also it's a bit of a little monster as well. It's like just squawking and crying and all these things and pissing on you and all that. So it's a bit of a interesting rite of passage.
Yeah, they're all little monsters, but they're cute little monsters. And yeah, you've just moved to Western Australia with your family as well. So you're currently in quarantine. And I'm in lockdown in Sydney. You're in quarantine in Perth. What a great time to check in because we have got time, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I just did a check-in before this call. So I look forward to reflecting on that experience with you.
Yeah, nice. So before we go into our actual conversation today, I would like to do an acknowledgement of the country today. And because we're in two different spots, we've got to do two. So I might just start, Lockie, with the Sydney one. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the iYarn Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Tell us where you are.
Well, Kaya, Drupa Nunuk Jining Nyale Kadijini Nunga Mo Buria King Karak Nija Buja. So I was just saying I'm on Noongar country. I was just speaking in Noongar Wajak dialect. This is the land I grew up on and I've lived here for most of my life. And acknowledging Noongar people, the bosses of this country, and also pay my respect to elders past, present, and all emerging leaders.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lockie. So today we are going to be talking about the importance of checking in with each other. Mental health and well-being are such an integral part of us and we need it at least as much as our physical health in order to function well on a day-to-day basis. So why is it that there is still a stigma attached to mental health and how do we integrate this conversation into our everyday lives? We're going to be talking about why Lockie created iYarn, what the platform offers and why, Lockie, you are so passionate about supporting the conversation that's so desperately needed. So Lockie, we met about a year ago, I think it was, and I remember the first time I came across your work was when you did a presentation for the Yes and Festival last year. And I remember researching everything about iYarn afterwards and the work that you do because obviously I've got a very big interest in this topic and I just wanted to know more and I just was really intrigued what you're doing there, what you're trying to achieve with it. And then we reached out to you as well and we had a bit of work to do with you with digital storytellers as well and stayed in contact and collaborating every now and then on little bits and pieces. And I'm just super excited to go deeper into your work today with you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Ever since we met back, and digital storytellers were very generous in supporting us early on in developing a bit of a Are You OK campaign for iYarn. At that moment, we'd only just released the mobile application. I think when you build up apps and web-based platforms, you think, everyone's going to all of a sudden embrace it and use it and share it with friends and go ahead like that. So yeah, it's been a great journey since then. We're slowly getting more traction and building the customer base, and yeah, it's a really exciting journey.
So before we go a bit further into iYarn and obviously the work that you're doing there, Lockie, you've given away a little bit about your background already by the acknowledgement of country, but just tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background, just so that our listeners get to know you a little bit more as well.
Yeah, so I was born on Noongar Budja. So Noongar Budja is, Noongar country, Noongar nation is the southwest of Western Australia. It's the largest Indigenous nation in the country. Not many people know that. There's over 14 different clans in the southwest. Covers, like, imagine you got a direct line from all the way north in Geraldton all the way down to Esperance. So the whole southwest is like the Noongar nation. I grew up on originally a lot in the wheat belt, which is Balladong country. But then Noongar or Wajak Budja. Wajak is the kind of the clan of the city. And that's kind of where I've grown up most of my youth. And yeah, beautiful. I can speak a little bit of Noongar, and that's come through, I've been very fortunate to connect with many different Indigenous leaders around the country, but particularly here in my home state, some very generous elders have passed on some knowledge and wisdom through to me, and some amazing mentors through my journey, and up in the Kimberley as well with Bardi and Yaru and up that country. And that was part of the result of mainly I set up a youth reconciliation organisation. It starts like many Australians going out to a foreign land and then getting, seeing something different. And that's what I had when I was very fortunate when I was at school. I was given the opportunity to go up to Bardi country and Gabadung campsite with Frank Davies block, and just saw a whole different side of Australia that I think more people should be given the opportunity to go out and connect. And I was lucky to listen to so many stories that have been passed down through generations of Bardi and Yaru and many Indigenous crew from the Kimberley, and just developed a real interest and curiosity. I'm still on an ongoing learning journey to understanding more. And the more I learn, the less I know.
Yeah,
and
that's often the way, isn't it?
Yeah, and you start realising far out. So, the ICF Foundation initially was all about enhancing educational facilities and resources in remote parts of Western Australia, and then it evolved into being more of a youth-run, youth-led reconciliation organisation where we got young Indigenous kids and non-Indigenous kids to come together and just have positive experiences connecting with country, culture, and people. It's great.
So you've always been really interested in that community side of things, and people's well-being and people's positive experiences. So it sounds like that's something that's come up through your background and through growing up in that area as well.
Exactly. It's interesting how I've been chatting a bit more about this concept of Indigenous entrepreneurship and, social entrepreneurship. And I find when I was working in non-for-profit land, and, traditional non-for-profits are sustained through kind of grants or philanthropic donations, whereas we kind of shift into being a bit of a social enterprise. So we offered a fee for service with cultural awareness training, which helped us cover our costs. And that's kind of how we ran the organisation. And it's interesting how, when you get brought up and, there's pivotal times, post-school, early university, this is this idea of, the social, you're part of a community and offering something of social value for your operation. And that's had a big influence around what I do now. And like a lot of the work I do is core to our operations, that we're all working in partnership with the community. And, this idea that we're working collaboratively. It's not like this traditional old corporate business where we're just trying to charge people and get money and have it all segregated. It's holistically all connected as a community. So that concept of community development kind of runs in my blood.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so when we're talking about iYarn, and I know that there is an Indigenous background to the word, but if you can tell us where the word comes from, what does it mean and what does it actually stand for?
Yeah, so through my journey with ICEA, I was fortunate a few years into it. One of the elders in the community, Bessie Ejai, pulled me aside and said, it's time now, Lockie, that we culturally adopt you into our community and give you a skin name. And that skin name is Binjali. And a big part of that cultural adoption was learning deep about Bardi culture. And one of the core kind of teachings of Bardi culture is this word called iYarn. So iYarn is a word for your body, your emotion, your mind, your spirit, your everything. And it comes up in dialogue when people go, how's your iYarn? And whenever anyone was to ask you, how's your Leon, it's kind of like, it's not appropriate to kind of brush that person off. Like a typical white fella will go, oh, how you going, Silver? Yeah, good, catch ya. If someone asks you, like my mum or, someone of my kid and my family would say, oh, but, how's your Leon? It's truly creating that safe space for me to share. Do I have a heavy Leon and I'm feeling down and out, or do I have a light Leon, I'm feeling strong, feeling good, I'm connected to country, my Leon, it's singing, is something that I hear some of my mentors out in the community say. And so that's Leon. And then over the years, work with the Kimberley Land Council and the Bardi community, the Bardi Rangers, and that I kind of came up, well, I want to do something. We need this for more white fellas as well. Because at that time, I was mid-20s, sad, had suicide in my family, and having had 2 family members, leaving us to that, and that was pretty devastating for us. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of mates from school, and it was just this really weird phase where I had like 8 people I knew who left to suicide. And I was just like, this is crazy. And I had a real shift, and I was like, we need to do something. And the concept is this concept of Leon I really liked. And speaking to my community, I was like, oh, let's use the word iYarn as a way for more white fellas and Western mob to come together and create that safe space and have a word to check in on each other. And that's kind of where I started that journey, which would have been around 2005, 2006. And, thinking about the concept and how do we turn this into something that maybe could create that space and facilitate the conversations that are needed. So that's how, iYarn started.
It sounds like when you're talking about iYarn, and how important it is and how that safe space has really been there for you since you've been a child, to talk about how you're actually feeling. It feels like that there is a real importance in the Indigenous culture to make space, to check in and to have a yarn with each other. And do you think that in our Western society we have forgotten that? We have forgotten how to check in, we have forgotten how to actually listen to people and how they are going?
Yeah, I think, I don't know all Indigenous people. I just know from my experience in my family and my community up in One Arm Point, that was really powerful to do. I think there's a lot of Indigenous philosophies, but I think there's a lot of, real great Western concepts around Christian philosophies of coming together and, being part of a community. I think it's more of as this concept of human values to check in with each other and be socially connected. That is part of our core being as a human. And, for me, connecting to that human side of me, the door was open through my connection with the Indigenous crew. But I think it's more of a universal human need is the connection. And as humans, we've kind of find the fast-paced life we live, we're not really stopping enough to really check in on each other, which is core to human connection and a human need. And it's interesting just talking this through now. It's like, I think it's more of a universal, as we hear now, lockdown, globally, COVID has just had such an impact on everyone. It doesn't matter what race you are, what your background is, not having that social connectedness can really rattle you. And but for me, connecting on country and these philosophies and Indigenous people will help me.
I want to talk about how COVID is affecting that side of things a little bit later on. But now, in terms of, when you're talking about the universal need, I totally agree, it's definitely a universal need. But the question is, do people actually see it or make time for it? And you've just said it before as well, Australia is very well known for that how you going culture. Everyone asks you, but do people actually want to hear the answer? Do people actually want to hear the response? And I think I told you that story before when I did go through quite a challenging time in my life, and I remember standing at the supermarket at the checkout and the woman asking me, how you going? And I was like, well, could be better, I can't remember what I said exactly, but I made a comment that I wasn't well, and she looked at me like, why are you telling me how you're feeling? I'm like, well, you've asked, don't ask if you don't want to know it.
I think it's the pleasantry. It's kind of like manners to some degree. And I don't know, I think about it, is it bad? Like, would I prefer someone to just not acknowledge me and go, pay the money and go the food, or someone saying with a smile, how are you going? I wonder, like, I probably prefer them just to say that, even if I'm feeling shit.
Definitely.
But, being real with it as well. It's like, if you put yourself out there to have those conversations with Emmy, Tom, Dick or Harry walking down the street, I don't think these create safe spaces. It's more, who is that small group of a handful of people you can really lean in on and check in on. And, if there's probably one person in the workplace or maybe two people, maybe there's probably someone in your family potentially and maybe one or two friends. And that's probably all you need. And I think when people are more real about this rather than expecting everyone to create that safe space for them, I've been doing this for a short while now and I start realising my ideals to everyone to check in on each other, it's not realistic. And the pleasantry are, and just smiling, these little things around, I see you. This is one exercise I got to do years ago as part of a leadership thing. Is like one of the real challenges a lot of people who are homeless is maybe not much you can do, but actually acknowledging them as people. People just walk by and almost acknowledge it. Oh, they're not there. But actually acknowledging them, even if you don't have money or anything to give, just saying, hey there, how are you? Or like, even when you say, that pleasantry, how are you? Or like, what's your name? And giving them that identification and that acknowledgement can be quite powerful for people's well-being and the sense of connected to a community. But yeah, we'll go into more detail around iYarn. There's that high level in businesses. You got different, and it's sad to think of it like this, but all businesses, you got different spheres of influence is for your stakeholders. And the closer of your spheres of influences, you got more airtime and connection with them. So obviously that smaller circle, it's like, in the meet the parents, whatever it is like that's that inner circle. Your inner circle, you can have these deeper yarns with. The further out in the circle to the person who lives in your community but is serving you food at the general store, what is your expectation around that connection? It's like smiling to each other, acknowledging one another, and that's it, And so I think about that a bit.
Yeah. So, Lockie, tell us a little bit more about iYarn then. So with iYarn, you are helping people to have these conversations and to start these conversations. So tell us a little bit about the platform, like who is it for, what does it do, how can people use it, and how can it help us?
Yeah, so the tool itself is something that a lot of coaches have been using for decades. The life wheel is really where it comes from. Like Tony Robbins, a lot of people have done Tony Robbins courses and, in that interesting phase in mid-20s with me and my mate who's done a lot of the Tony Robbins courses, he went to them and, he got a few of the recordings and I had a few of the recordings. And one of the big parts of the teachings were these categories of life concept, where you choose your categories of life. What are the areas you want to flourish in? Is it financially? Is it fitness? Is it nutrition? Is it academically? Is it your business? Is it your romance? Is it love? All these different categories of life. And the idea, if you don't track it, you can't see how things are going and you can't progress. And the idea is that if you had you could track it, you could then identify the areas that you can improve on and get better and get to where you want to go. And they say kind of bridging the gap from where you are to where you want to be. And so you kind of put your goals or vision for your categories and then you maybe give yourself a number 0 to 10 in that area. 10 being, yes, you've hit that vision of where you want to be in those categories, and 0 is like, no, I'm nowhere near it, I'm way off it. And instead of just doing like a survey like that, you do it in like a wheel shape, so like a bike wheel. And imagine where the rubber of the bicycle wheel is a 10 on the outside, and each spoke is a scale of 1 in the middle to 10 on the outside. So imagine you got 8 spokes, 8 areas of life, you plot the data together, and then you dot the dots together. And one of my early mentors who shared this with me when I would have been 17, I used to catch up with him every other month. And he did this with me before I heard of Tony Robbins or anything like that. And we used to have a really meaningful conversation. And that helped me build up more self-awareness. And then he could also guide me and mentor me to saying, oh, this is where you're at. These are some tools and techniques around what you can do to bridge the areas from where you are to where you want to be. I was like, this is so powerful. And it's something that I could do with anyone. I don't have to be this genius person. And then what I found, I was doing it as a 20-year-old to some, 15-year-old volunteers in ICEA as a bit of a mentor to them. And I didn't have to be an expert coach or trainer, but I could just say, this is where they're at and they're not satisfied with that. And then I just ask them good questions. Or what would you need to do to get from a 3 to a 5? And is there anything maybe I could do to support you to get from a 3 to a 5 or 10? And I was like, this is it's so simple, but yet it is quite empowering for individuals to use to be, supportive people. And the big thing around is language here. It's not about helping people. It's about supporting people. And with the language, as soon as you start getting into this space, and this is one of the big issues around a lot of Indigenous advancement, a lot of the typical white fella will come in and say, oh, we're going to help you. But it's not what help people need, it's support. And support is empowering, whereas help is almost patronising. You've got people who need your help. That's assuming you're in a better position than that person. And when you start off a conversation coming from, oh, I'm here to help you, all of a sudden it's patronising, it's not empowering to the person. So the idea is, I like iYarn to be about creating supportive spaces and safe spaces for people to grow together. And that's kind of where it came from. And I was using iYarn. I used to write it down on a piece of paper or napkins. Literally, I used to sometimes when I had nothing, I used to pour water on a table and draw a circle and say, out of 10, where would you be right now? But the issue is that I lost all that data. I lost all those points and I didn't put into Excel. Sometimes I did and tracked how it went, but it was just a laboursome process and life catches up and it's hard. So then I was like, let's just turn this into an app to make it super simple to track and monitor and see how you've been going longitudinally over time. And that's been super powerful. And that's kind of where iYarn started.
And I really like when you're talking about the helping versus supporting as well, and how you talk about the fact that it's almost patronizing, because at the end of the day, you're supporting people to have the awareness of where they are, right? Because they might not even have the awareness of where they are in those categories, and everything that they need, they have inside of them, but you just need to show them the way, and you need to show them where the points of improvement are for them. So I really like that. So that's how iYarn started. So who are you working with now? You said you started off mentoring other kids, supporting them, and then you've put it into an actual platform. So tell us about that experience and who you're working with now.
Well, we started off, I had this great vision. I was like, this is a powerful tool to help people to be better mates, better friends, parents, etc. But the challenge is commercializing a product like that is really difficult. I had this great vision and purpose behind it, and it is still, that's a big core of what we do. But to make it commercial and sustainable in the business terms, I needed to make it relevant into the workplace. So then how do people use this and be supportive workplaces or supportive, in the elite sports space to track people's well-being and collect data over time. So there's so many different applications to iYarn, which is good and bad. It's bad because it kind of dilutes our focus a fair bit. People say, what's a problem you're solving? And, the problem we're solving is that there's a big issue around, we got disconnected people, we got mental health crisis, and well-being is, low for a lot of people. And, what we need them to become aware of that there is a huge amount of support resources out there, but making people build that connection from identifying that they're not where they want to be and then getting support from professionals or their workplaces to be more compassionate to where they're at in that moment of time so that they can move through that phase. Because one thing that's certain about life is that we're all going to suffer to some degree. And putting your head in the sand and saying you're not going to suffer is just, it's not addressing the problem. Because unless you address the problem, you're not going to be able to grow. So the idea is that, iYarn, we've got this base, really reliable platform, which people can use to build deeper connections with their friends and family, and that's great. But it's not something we seek to make money off. That's like our social concept around people use this to check in themselves. Like I get calls up for people who use it, they've been battling cancer and they use it to just check in themselves every day to just say, they're on a journey of healing. And some days are better than others. And it gives them saying, this is just a shit day right now. But 2 days ago, I was up, and that's great. I've got family, I've got friends around me, it's supportive. And it's just really useful for self-reflection and self-awareness. But in the workplaces, people are using it, managers are using it as a bit of a coaching tool. So they may choose areas of the workplace that they want to check in on. It could be communication. It could even be real work-related tasks like sales, revenue. But then a lot of the workplaces have a bit of a holistic approach. There's a bit of work stuff, and then there's a bit of personal stuff around, hobbies, sleep, well-being, fitness. And then there's the work side of things as well, around values or workplace, like vision. So it could even be support in the office or workplace. And then that can be like a monthly or bi-monthly conversation that maybe the manager has with their direct line reports. And then all that data gets aggregated across the organisation, and then all of a sudden the executive team can see where there's areas of strength, which could be revenues, whereas the areas of weakness are fun. So maybe they're like, oh God, we're making all this money, but no one's having fun. Or the other way around, let's start putting a bit more investment into these things. So if sales are low, let's invest into getting a sales trainer to come. Things like that would be good.
Yeah, it's interesting because, we've started using iYarn with digital storytellers as well. And I just want to quickly talk to that experience as well when you're talking about, using it in an organization. I think, for us, it's been really valuable. Like we've started using it at the end of last year, and we're checking in once a month. And like you said, we've got half work-related topics and then half private related topics, because we also understand that it is interconnected and your private life does affect you in your work life and vice versa, so it is important to look at that holistically. But we're measuring things like work relationships, work culture, professional development, personal development, health and well-being overall, happiness, those things. And it's really interesting to see where people are at and how people are changing through different things that are happening as well. And I think it's really important to look at that, and then you're able to really check in with somebody and being like, your work relationship score has been really low for the last 3 months. What's happening? Why is this happening? And so it gives you the opportunity to start a conversation around a topic that you didn't know, that you might have not known is a problem before you saw those scores, right? And so it helps you really keep your team engaged and happy and try and support them through certain issues that they are experiencing, which I think is super valuable.
Yeah, exactly. And well, thanks for sharing that insight. And, I think the thing that comes up for me that I really like around you as a digital storyteller and what iYarn allows, it's not like prescriptive model around these are the 6 things you need to check in on with your team. It allows you as a business owner and leader or a team of active and humans and adults to come up and co-create the segments you want to check in on and say, why are we working in this place? Because every workplace is culturally different. And for you to be able to choose what you want to check in on is empowering for that organization. And that it's bizarre, like a lot of these, our competitors in this space will be quite prescriptive and say, these are the 10 things you need to check in on your staff on a quarterly basis. And that'll improve culture. But then it goes back to that thing is like, oh, we're helping you rather than we're supporting, we're part of a community and we're acknowledging everyone as unique individuals and humans, and we can co-create the culture we want to be in.
And what you just said as well, it's like every organization is so different and so individual, so you can't just yes, certain things obviously you can, relate to everybody, but it is about really finding the things that work for you. And we started off with 10 different things, and then after a few check-ins, we were like, it doesn't really quite work. And so we went back again and we changed them again, depending on what we heard as well and what resonated with people. And now we're at the place where we're like, okay, this is really working for us. And I think the other thing that's important that I find, and I'm going to ask you the question once I've shared my experience, but for us, we do the monthly check-in as a team and it's totally confidential. But then I am getting the results, like I'm the person in the team that's actually looking at the results, and I'm then following up with people on a monthly basis or every 2 months, depending on how the scores are, and just having personal one-on-one check-ins as well, to really dig a little bit deeper and see where we as an organization can support people, or where I as an individual can even support people, and give them some guidelines. And I think that's really important, that checking in after the check-in. It's not just your score is there and that's it, and we don't care if it's a 1 or a 10. It's like, okay, we have seen that you are struggling in a certain area, and we're here to check in with you to see how we can support you, make that score bigger again and make that part of your life potentially better again. And I mean, certain things are obviously within our reach and we can help and support, but others might be, out of our hands. So I just wanted to ask, what are the kind of guidelines or the things that you are suggesting, I guess, for people to do after that check-in, after they've got all that data? Because the data is awesome and I think it's needed, but what's that next step where you really feel like, how can we support our people actually then make the difference,
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Like, iYarn's really useful to creating a space for people to give you that feedback and showing maybe how trends are going. And then for someone like yourself, who it seems like you're kind of stepping into that role of like head of people or culture or something like that, and then all of a sudden one challenging side of iYarn is that if you aren't equipped to have those conversations, it can be quite daunting. You're like, oh, I've got all this information, I don't know how to have that conversation. So what we're stepping into now a lot more, a lot of the way how we're growing the platform is with coaches. So then they'd play the role that you're playing, or they'd be there supporting you, and you'd be reaching out to them around how would I address this. But now what we're hoping to do is, with the New South Wales government and the mentally friendly campaigns that's been running there, is that actually we are linked in with the government's kind of support resources. So there are a lot of already publicly available support resources there, on more of mentally friendly side of things rather than like a professional development side of things. But like, hypothetically, if mental health is one of your segments, someone puts in a low score of a 2 or a 3. What do you do as a small business to have that, support that person? Do you have an existing EAP, Employment Assist Program, that you can refer them to? Or if not, what we've got now as a result of COVID, the government actually have platforms and you can book in a counselling session for free. It's all covered by the government.
I actually signed up for something yesterday from the government, like a 3-hour workshop around mental health and wellbeing. It's amazing. So
Yep, I attended that. But then also if you're an employee, you can get a session with a counsellor. It's all organised. So what we're hoping to do is kind of link in with that a little bit more. So automatically, if someone puts in a low score, they automatically get sent a support resource with all those government resources that they can book in and do all that. The question is, with schools, we empower the schools. Like, even for you, Sylvia, if you wanted your staff to get an automatic response if they had a low score for a certain segment, and you wanted them to just even watch a YouTube video that you think is useful around professional development, around marketing, sales, whatever it is, we can set that up. So for companies and workplaces to do it, if they want bespoke messaging going out to their team members when they put a low score in or whatever, we send that out.
That's really interesting, because that's what I'm doing at the moment, I'm playing that role. I'm then going and I'm like, okay, this person is struggling in that field. I'm going and I'm finding resources, telling them about books that they could read or like podcasts that they could listen to or something, in order to support. So that's really interesting to hear that you're working on that.
Yeah, well, it's all live. So a lot of the schools we work with, we've worked with over 25 schools now. It'll be over 20,000 students. But currently we've got over 10,000 students using it on a weekly basis. And the emails get sent to kids if they have a red flag score. So if a score is below 2 or 3 or whatever the school deemed to be red flag, we'll send them the support resources relevant. It could be exercise, nutrition, sleep. Sometimes schools do mental health. They get sent Lifeline, Kids Helpline and things like that automatically as part of their duty of care.
That's amazing. And I would love to go into that a little bit deeper as well, because I love the fact that you're working with schools and that you're working with the younger generation. Unfortunately, we are living in a world where there is still such a stigma attached to mental health and well-being. And it's like, if you break your leg or if you hurt your arm, nobody would think, oh, I can't tell my work colleagues about that. But if you're having a bad day and you're like mentally not in a good state, people really still struggle with that they can voice that and that they can talk about that. And I feel like here you working with the younger generation is so important and urgent, because if they can grow up knowing that it is normal to talk about your mental health the same way as you talk about your physical health, that's what we need, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges now is how do you have a mentally friendly workplace? Because a lot of these people who are leading businesses, they didn't come up in an environment like that. It's like, leave your emotions at home, leave all that at home, you're here to work, la da da da. But like, as you know, your work environment and personal life is overlapped more now. People working from home, that means you're working with kids at your house, or you're working with your partner, whatever it is, or you're home alone. This can have a real impact, and this is the way the world is now. And if businesses continue putting their head in the sand about this stuff, at the end of the day, there's all the facts out there that there's so much lost productivity as a result of disengagement and wellbeing challenges associated. Productivity goes down due to mental health and wellbeing challenges. So if workplaces aren't creating that safe environment to do that, and the biggest way I believe to overcome that and make it safe for people to say, you know what, I'm actually feeling a bit flat today, I'm going to knock off at midday because I'm just like, I'll get these things done, but I need this half a day off. It's when you've got context in a relationship and you've probably done like a check-in, like an iYarn, which helps you build context. They know you got trust. And when you got trust in relationships, you feel more comfortable to share what's really going on. And then you can go, like, I've got a lot of mates who work in very old school conservative workplaces, but they've got a lot of trust. They've probably gone and had beers till 2 a.m. in the morning on Friday night, and they've got trust, they've got context. And they can actually have that yarn with that bloke. But, some places in this sad situation now, we're working digitally. And how are you building that trust in your workplace? I'm not saying going out and drinking late builds trust and deep relationships, but the sad thing is I've got mates all around the world, and for me to stay connected with those mates around the world or other side of the country when I'm not having beers with them and socialising and all that, this is where iYarn becomes quite useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting because I work in an organization where we kind of live and breathe that. So for us, it is quite second nature, and for me, it always has been. But yeah, like you said, there is a lot of organizations out there where you do kind of have to leave yourself at the door, and then you pretty much bring your work self into the space. But when you're working with businesses, do you feel like there's a shift happening? Do you feel like more and more people are actually realizing how important it is to allow people to be themselves and to allow people to build up that trust, to have those deep and meaningful relationships at the end of the day where you can really trust each other and, because it makes for a better workplace as well.
Totally. I think if you're a leader and you haven't heard of, the stuff about being vulnerable and leadership and building connection, like vulnerability builds connection. Brené Brown says that in her famous TED Talks, and, workplaces need to do that to be relevant. And it's not about just being vulnerable for the sake of it. It's like, how do you genuinely form as a leader people to be vulnerable and share what's really going on? Because if you're not, there's so much lost opportunity for connection. And when you got more connection, you got more trust, and more trust in a workplace boosts performance and productivity and collaboration and all these other things. So, I think it's those workplaces that aren't doing that. I think they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot a fair bit.
Yeah, it's interesting as well because right now with COVID, you feel like people almost they need to go there. They don't even have a choice anymore because, 2 years ago, if you would have asked a lot of people, can we work from home? A lot of offices would have said, no, we can't do our work from home. Well, now they had to adapt to that. And in order to adapt to that, they also need to adapt to managing a team virtually and making sure that everybody still stays connected and happy. So I feel like it's almost, you can't live without it anymore. It doesn't work anymore if you don't incorporate that and if you don't embrace that side of things.
Yeah, totally. And there's mixed experiences. I was on an EduTech conference yesterday and it's talking about schools, and the empowering question is like, what were the takeaways to the positives of last year? All of a sudden all the kids working from school, but we've had this technological evolution is rapidly, we're 10 years ahead of where we thought we would be with our technical way we're supporting education. And I think in the workplace, it's the same. You work in the finance sector and they say you have to be at home, and a lot of the blokes I speak to say, oh no, I couldn't work from home, too busy with the kids and the family and the wife and all, this is a very old school conservative concepts. But, it's just we're forced to do it again and again and again with these lockdowns. I think people are kind of surrendering to this is the new way of work. And, it's not expected that you have to fly around the world to do a meeting or get a deal over the line. In some places I'm hearing a lot like in the VC phase, like, previously you'd have to actually fly over to America to do a pitch, but now it's like, actually, no, Zoom calls totally sufficient. So, there's a lot of pros to a lot of this, and back to the point around being vulnerable and leadership, but I think it does build that connection and that.
Yeah. And so talking about COVID and how it's generally affecting us, I mean, it's been such a challenging and taxing time for so many people. What does that do to our mental health and well-being, Like, how does it affect us? I mean, our lives have been completely thrown upside down. So many people over the last 18 months have been in and out of lockdowns, like you said, in and out of homeschooling, etc., not being able to see family, not being able to see friends, not being able to connect with other people, in the same way that they used to. So what does that do to our mental health and well-being overall?
I can talk from my own personal experience and the clients I work with, and the sentiment in the community now, of my community, and I just think we all know that it's really rattled us as a community out of our old norm. And I think I kind of step into my rite of passage facilitator kind of space now, and it's like, all change creates space for growth. But the challenge is what is an empowering way to look at this? Is it empowering for us to think, oh, it's all doom and gloom, mental health's bad, or actually this is a space for growth? I think, the reality is, the elephant in the room is, it is having a real adverse impact on a lot of Australians and a lot of people globally, because their worlds are getting put upside down. There is so much hardship going around. People are forced out of work. Cafes, businesses are shutting down, and it's devastating. And I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I'm able to keep on going to some degree, but I don't know how devastating it is for those people. I guess all I can say is you just got to find the little bits of positives in each one of your days as we get through this phase. This will pass. Pain is part of life. Suffering is part of life. Challenges are part of life. This is one of those. And as a collective, we all need to kind of rise up and make it through. Some people are a lot more privileged than others. Like, I'm privileged. I'm very privileged. But all I can kind of say is that a lot of this suffering is relative. But as a community, we need to kind of step out of, ourselves. You need to support yourself, nutritionally healthy and all that, but then also step out and support others, because, everyone is going through this journey at different levels, and that we all go down highs and lows at different times. And I think we've got to be compassionate and supportive of other people, because some people do actually need that support. You need to grab their hand and support them through that tough time, that phase, and empower them to say, this will pass. It will pass. Because I think when you start thinking it won't pass and this is going to be like this for the rest of your life, that's when people lose hope. And then that's when you get the serious mental health challenges and despair. And when I say reach out, it's actually you as a friend is actually supporting someone to go see a professional. And it's not about you trying to be that psychologist or that counsellor. You are not a professional. If someone is down in the dumps and really bad, your role is to support them to see a professional. And I think that message isn't kind of put out there enough. People think, you see people on social media, just call me up, just check in. Devastatingly, a few months ago, there's been a few suicides in Bondi, local board riders and all this stuff. And you got people coming out, just check in on me, man, just do it. And, but the thing is, like, having been there with family members who've taken their life to suicide, your role is not that. Your role is actually supporting them to see a professional. You are not a professional. There's people who train for decades to be professional psychologists, and that's what you can do. For me, I've had other family members who've said they are feeling, suicidal and things like that. And my role for them is saying, all right, cool, let's do a check-in every day. But then also let's make sure that you're going to your psychologist every week and you're doing that for the next 10 weeks. And we're going to do a check-in on the iYarn app every day. And that's what we do, and that's why I feel empowered. And then if he hasn't done it by 10 o'clock in the morning, I call him up and say, mate, what's going on? And he's like, oh, yeah, it's all good. Sorry, mate, I'll do it now. And then he goes, I'm on track. Things are okay. I'm focusing about gratitude. I'm eating healthy. I'm exercising regularly. I can control the things I can control, and there's things that are out of my control that will pass.
And it's like you said, you can support them to a certain degree, and it's important to check in, but that it's important to see how far you can go and where there's actually professional help that is needed in order to get those people, out of the pit of despair, I guess,
And also acknowledging that a lot of people are going through a hell of a lot of suffering and you don't know what anyone else is going through. So assuming that, say you're in Sydney and you're in lockdown, assuming that everyone's having that same experience, that's you being ignorant, and you got to be compassionate about that. I say this, but I'm not perfect. I find myself being judgmental at times, but I find that if I can be a good person and check in on myself and check in on others people more, I'm trying to be the best I can.
Yeah, I think we're all trying, right? And it's like you said before, it's like not every day is the same either, like going through lockdown or whatever it may be. One day you're totally fine and then the next day you're not, because something just really bothers you or you're just really sad. I think where the issue as well comes, like you said, when people say to you, okay, I'm not feeling very well, I'm suicidal even, that's being very aware and very open about it. But a lot of the time it's the people that we don't know that are actually doing it really tough. And I just want to talk about Are You OK Day is coming up on the 9th of September, and it is all about creating a world where we are all connected and protected from suicide. And looking through some of the statistics around suicide that are on the Are You OK website, it says 8 people take their lives every day in Australia, and then for every death by suicide it's estimated that 30 people will attempt to take their lives. And 89% of people report knowing someone who has made a suicide attempt. So that just shows us how incredibly important it is to check in with people, right? Especially in these uncertain times. But the statistics are really big, and when you're reading through them, you're like, wow, I didn't actually realize how many there are. And I don't actually know the difference now with COVID as well, if it has made a big difference in suicide rates. I know there have been more mental health issues. Not sure if the suicide rates have necessarily gone up. But yeah, it's a time where we really need to check in with people.
There's one other stat that's out there, I forget exactly, but it's something like, over 80% of men believe that their mates will reach out to them if they're feeling bad, but then less than 30% of men actually feel comfortable to be able to reach out to their mates when they're feeling pretty down. So this is kind of like one of those stats as well, talking about the need to check in on each other. Are You OK campaign is an awareness-raising campaign to help people have conversations around wellbeing, mental health, in all sectors of our community. And it's a fantastic campaign to build awareness, to have Are You OK conversations. And that's really powerful with their branding, their messaging, and then they're starting to get a lot more into how to have an Are You OK conversation in those different sectors of community, the football club, in the business, in the workplace, in the community or on mine sites, whatever it is. And yeah, the Are You OK campaign is amazing. We're in dialogue with them. I've been chatting with them a lot around making sure that we're really aligned with what they're doing. They don't have any formal partnerships with any third-party groups, because all of a sudden they're just an awareness campaign, and it gets quite convoluted when they form formal partnerships with any one group. However, a lot of schools and workplaces are using iYarn when they're doing their Are You OK Day session. And Are You OK Day is a good day, and it's a good awareness day, but then the idea is that it's a catalyst for you bringing mentally friendly workplaces, school environments, that happens throughout the year. Are You OK is successful when the suicide rates decrease, and the suicide rates decreasing when we create more connected, supportive communities. So it's not about them just getting heaps of people doing it on the day. It's actually, yes, they do it, they have conversations, and those people feel motivated to take it to the next level throughout their ecosystem with checking in.
Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting when you're saying that men find it also harder, only 30% would actually check in with you. And because suicide rates are actually a lot higher in men than in women as well. That's the other thing, right? Because they are finding it harder. So Lockie, what would be your message to everybody listening? How important is it to really check in? Make sure you check in with your friends, make sure you check in with your neighbors, make sure you support people along this journey, because like you said, sometimes it's fun and it's awesome and it's great and we're all having a good time, but it doesn't go without suffering and pain at other times. And how important is it to really check in with people?
Yeah, I think you don't realise how important it is until sadly you lose someone. I think it's in checking in casually. It's just about listening to the cues. One of the classic things in workplaces, their cameras off, maybe be disengaged, or they're not responding to text messages or calls or things like that. They're kind of getting disengaged. These are like signs at that extreme level. But, a big part of iYarn is around flourishing. We do the are you okay thing, but it's actually checking in around living the best version of your life. It's not about this quite low energy, negative dialogue. If I had these heavy check-in, are you okay yarns with my friends all the time, they wouldn't want to hang out with me. It's just this heavy yarn. So we talk turkey, have fun and hang out, but then also respectful to each other and really create that safe space to share. And sometimes you need to start off that safe space through being vulnerable with that person in the first place. Because asking them to be vulnerable without you being vulnerable themselves, it's a big step for them to share with you if you're not willing to be vulnerable with them in the first place. Say something about that may have happened, or something you've heard of about, something how you've been feeling at times in the past. It kind of creates that space. So, and being honest, and that's why I find iYarn really useful, because I can genuinely, right now, I could share you my will, and I could show you that, for example, maybe finances are really low. And that's me being vulnerable with that person and sharing about, this is the situation I'm in right now. We've had to turn everything upside down, just had a newborn, we've moved interstate, we've got a mortgage, all this stuff. But for our family's well-being, we choose to leave the state because it's the right thing for us. And then that could maybe create a space for them to be honest with themselves about where they're at with certain areas, and then we can build connection, and then we can have a yarn about supporting one another. So yeah, it's really important in that environment to do that for friends, but then also acknowledge your workplaces are different. Sometimes, workplaces aren't equipped to have those conversations, and, that's fine. That's where you have a conversation maybe with a psychologist with the EAP, because, the workplace may be more based around your professional development, which tends to influence your well-being and mental health. So how are you checking in on those things? Because we know that promotes better engagement and all those things. Yeah.
Lockie, thank you so much for checking in with me today, for our conversation, and for sharing some of your wisdom and your knowledge around that, sharing what you're doing with iYarn, how you're helping that conversation go out there. And yeah, thank you so much for the work you do in that space. I think it's really urgently needed. It's really, really important, and it will always be important. So thank you for doing the work.
Yeah, Sylvia, it's great. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Always love connecting with you. Big heart, lots of love to give. And thinking of you in lockdown. And yeah, if you want us to set up those emails, we can do that with the workplace and all that. That'd be great. So thank you, and I'll catch you later.
Thank you so much, Lockie, for sharing all your knowledge and wisdom today with us. The three main pieces of wisdom that came out for me. The first one that I really liked is when you were quoting Brené Brown, around vulnerability builds connection. And I think that is so true. The more vulnerable you can be, the more open and honest you can be, the more likely people are going to be sharing with you as well. And people are going to be telling you when there's something wrong with them, and in which case you can then turn around and really support them and guide them through what they can do next. I think that's a really beautiful, beautiful thing. Then the second one is that pain is part of life. Sometimes life is awesome and it's all about rainbows and unicorns. But we do go through tough times. No one is going through life without enduring some pain or suffering at some stage. But we know that as a collective, we really need to rise above that and make it through. And in order to do that, the more we can look out for each other, the more that we can open the space and the conversation around mental health and well-being, and really be there for other people and allow them to talk about it, the more likely we'll make it through. And the last thing that Lockie said was that, you can support your friends, you can support your family, you can support your colleagues, but there is a point and a time where it's best if you support them by finding other help for them as well. Maybe they need to talk to a psychologist, maybe they need some professional help, maybe it's something where you can't help them through anymore, where they really need some professional help, and just being there for them and guiding them along that way, I think is really beautiful. We've mentioned a few resources today as well. Lockie talked about, Tony Robbins, Brené Brown. So I'll put a few of those into our podcast notes. You can also get in touch with Lockie via the website iYarn.com or on Instagram under @I_Yarn, YARN_. Reach out to him if you want to know more, if you want to follow along, or if you want to implement iYarn in your private life or in your organization as well. It's such an important tool, and it's super helpful to check in with people and to really see where they're standing in certain areas in your life. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I really hope you got something out of this episode today. We are living in some very unpredictable and challenging times, and checking in with each other and being there for each other really is so important. It feels like it's more important than ever to really be there for the people around you. Make sure that they're okay. Make sure that you are okay as well. Make sure that you have somebody that you can check in with as well, because sometimes people, are there for everybody else and they kind of forget about themselves. So make sure there's somebody that you can talk to about your things as well. I hope that the information and knowledge that has been shared with you today is really helping you and guiding you, and might have given you some new ideas as well, what to implement within your family or within your team or, within your organization. Please do share the podcast with your family, with your friends, or anyone you think might benefit from this information. I really hope this episode brought some sunshine to your soul. I'm sending love and light your way, and until next time.